Hey, thanks for joining today. So the project we're going to do now is we're going to do a very basic repaint of this room. The room was renovated maybe 2 or 3 years ago, so there's not a whole lot that really needs to be done. You're going to want to pull all the contents out of the room, which we haven't done yet, but we're going to do before we paint. You're also going to want to just lightly dust off the walls because just course of day to day, you're going to get some dust and things like that will be on the walls, and we want to get that off so that the paint will adhere to the wall really well. We're also going to take off light switches, faceplate covers, put a piece of tape over them. Okay, we've cleaned out the room. The only other thing that we have to do is now that we've taken the covers off all of the outlets and switches and all that, is we just put a piece of tape over them like that, just so the paint doesn't get on them. And a little bit more prep work and we'll be all set to go. Okay, we are putting painter's tape along the baseboard just so that we don't make a mess down there. And so I'm going to do it in pieces because it's easier to make sure that it gets adhered. So we're just covering the top and then pressing down to make sure that the paint doesn't kind of backfill into that. And like I said, that just helps kind of make everything go smooth. And according to the painters of Pinterest, you should remove the tape when the paint is still wet. Otherwise, you could be separating the dry paint on top of the tape from the dry paint on your wall, and that would be no good. So that will be our plan. As soon as we are done painting that part of the wall, we'll take the paint off. The other thing that I sometimes do, I'm not going to today, but let me tip this here, is underneath this right here, I'll put the newspaper, you still can't see that, can you? I'll put the newspaper underneath the tape here, and that way you'll have kind of a finished edge of protection from the paint, but we're going to be a lot more careful than that, so that won't be an issue. Okay, so the room is cleaned out, as you can see behind me, and we are ready to bring in the paint supplies so that we can get ready to start painting. You want to do one wall at a time because the trim along the edges you're going to do with a brush, and then you're going to roll the rest. So you want to do that so that what you do with the brush and the roll dries at the same time, so it'll be a smoother finish. Now, speaking of the roll, Ashley, can you bring me the rolls, one of the paint rolls that's in the bag in the corner? Yep. Should be a bag of 3 of them or so. And I just want to show you something with the rolls that you kind of be aware of. So this one is a 3/8 inch nap, I believe is what it's called. What that refers to is the thickness of the the nap, I guess is what they're calling it. So that's what I'll call it. But the thicker it is, the more of a texture you'll get when you put the paint on the wall. So when you use a paintbrush, you paint it smooth, but when you use a roller, it gives it a little bit of a texture. And if you don't want a whole lot of the texture, then what you do is you get a smaller nap. So like I said, this one's 3/8, so if you don't want quite that much, then get smaller than 3/8. I think there were 3 different varieties in the store when I went and looked, and this is about in the middle, so that's what we're going to go with. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to move in our painting supplies and tarps to protect the floor and things like that. Okay, we've got our can of paint here that we're going to use for this room. Ashley picked it out. So there's something very important that you need to do before you start actually painting or taking any paint out of the can. Well, unless you count taking the top off, but that goes without saying. Okay, what we're doing is when you paint, you get all kinds of paint around the lip here. What we're going to do is we're just going to take a hammer and we're going to poke holes in the top of that so that when paint gets there, it drips back into the paint can. And that will make your mess less. Whoops, it'd be funny if I dropped it inside. All right. Holes through there now. So the next thing that we're going to do, you notice I've got it on a cardboard here just to prevent spilling and stuff, is we're going to just stir it up some more. It's been a couple days since we picked it up, so we just want to make sure that the paint is adequately stirred. So we're getting there. We're almost ready to start painting. I always want to make sure that you don't put too much paint on the brush at one time, because especially when we're working these lines, we want to make sure that we're not over painting. You know, we want a nice crisp edge. Don't use too much paint, but don't use so much that you see the old color either. If it was really a like stark difference, you know, if we had like a funky purple or whatever, or a light and go into a real dark, or a dark to a real light, we would probably have to do a primer. But I think we're going to be okay without having to do that. So you can see here we got that corner is just about done, that top line anyway. So we're going to go down and around, and we're going to work on this wall with the hand cutting of the paint in around the edges, and then we're going to roll it up, and we'll show you what that looks like when we get to that point. Getting ready to roll some of this paint on. Hopefully I don't roll my mic cable. So brand new roller, we got to get it nice and wet. Not too wet like my finger, but just got to get it, the nap kind of full. We got to be careful of that end because it's got a lot of extra paint as well. So we're going to start right here. Always being careful of our edges and making sure that when we overlap our roll lines that we're not leaving like a thick paint edge in there. And crisscrossing a little bit. How do you think that looks, Ashley? What do you think of the color?
I really like that.
No, you should. You picked it. And I'm trying to get as close to the edge as I can, because I want the texture from the nap of the roller to get where I painted with the brush. And the brush is smooth, and that's why we want to make sure that the roller gets there. Get some more paint. You don't want to dry it out. So why do you think it's a good idea to do the series?
Because I said if I had an old house and I don't know anything about upkeeping houses. And since you know a lot about them, even if you weren't a realtor, you know a lot about houses, that share your information with the people who are less fortunate.
Okay.
James Jock of Remax North Country in his natural habitat, painting his daughter's room.
Good progress so far. We're about, I don't know, 2/3 of the way around, and we're hoping 1 gallon will do it. It looks like it will, but normally we would have pulled off some of the tape off the bottom, but we're going to wait because we want to see if we're going to need a second coat or not. We're going to put a fan in here and a heater because we've got the windows cracked. It's like 40 degrees out, so good enough. So we're going to do that, and once it's dry, probably tomorrow, we'll take a look and see if we're done painting or if we need to do another coat. So the paint is dry. After it dried in good sunlight, we determined we did not need a second coat of paint. So we let it dry overnight just to make sure that, you know, everything was dry all the way through the paint. Then we put everything back in, put our outlet covers back on, switch plate covers back on, and move my daughter back in. So we are all done with this project. On to the next one, and thanks for watching my old house.
James Jock is a real estate associate broker with Remax North Country. He primarily services sellers and buyers in Clinton County, located in the northeast corner of New York State. Jim would be glad to help you with any of your real estate needs. He looks forward to hearing from you.